worship. Okay, everyone please stand as I say the opening prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this moment. We come to you again for this evening service. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much, and we ask that you continue to be with us in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. Let me just echo and just say thank you to Phil and Dana and Damien for coming out of their busy schedule to share with us this wonderful presentation. We do know that there's a lot going on, and as I've been saying all week, the devil needs to back off.
Yes.
And he truly needs to back off, and this includes us taking a stand and embrace ourselves with knowledge of what it takes in order to make those changes and do those transformations so that God's will be done. And so thank you guys for coming. I won't be long, I'll be very quick in saying that Peace Ministry's been around for about greater than 22 years. Phil is the CEO and founder of that ministry. He is a sexual risk avoidance specialist and been doing this presentation for quite a while. I've had the privilege of being exposed to this presentation in Toronto. I do acknowledge that it started here in our community in Hamilton, but I'll let Phil do the honor of sharing his journey, and welcome.
Thank you, Pastor Julia. And I just want to thank you for taking the time to stay and to listen, because you care about your kids and you care about our spiritual heritage.
Amen.
And that's what this is all about. That's what this is all about. Just want to acknowledge and thank Pastor, and I believe his wife from the Church of God.
It's my daughter.
Your daughter, that's right. Oh, we see, you know, you look so young, Pastor. From Church of God in Hamilton, in West Hamilton. Thank you for coming and being here. All right, just a little bit of background. I spent 30 years in public education. And in that time, and people often ask, how does a teacher get involved with a ministry about sex? Well, when my daughter, when I was a teacher, I started to see curriculum changing. And I started to get extremely uncomfortable. As a matter of fact, I got so uncomfortable, the last 3 years I was in education, as an educator, I couldn't sleep at night. I would wake up every half hour, 40 minutes with nightmares about the impact that the curriculum messaging was going to have on children. And I saw children going through the wrong doors. I saw children burning up. And I would wake up 6, 7, 8 times a night. And it got to the point where I just couldn't stay there any longer. But what actually motivated us to establish this organization was, in 1996, my daughter, she was in grade 5. And 10 years old, she came home from school extremely upset about what she had learned in school. And I came home from work, and my wife says, so Ruth said, you know, Jennifer is so upset. I said, what did she learn? She can't even tell me. I said, well, I can go to school and I can ask questions. So I went to school and I found out that my 10-year-old learned how to put a contraceptive on an male anatomically correct model. She learned in sex ed class about alternative sexual lifestyles. She learned about, so I thought, okay, so I went to the curriculum, and I had gone through the curriculum, and then I called the school board. I wrote letters to the Ministry of Education, and I said, I was asked if my child could take sex ed, I read the curriculum document, and what my daughter experienced wasn't in the curriculum. And what I was told is exactly what you will be told. Whether you live here in Hamilton, Hawaii, California, Texas, doesn't matter. You will be told the teacher has the authority to go beyond the minimum expectations of the curriculum based on their understanding of the needs of the student. Now, in a multi-worldview society, you're not sure what the worldview is of the teacher in the classroom and what the teacher feels is important. Okay? Then we did more research and we found out that what happened was in 1982 in Canada, when we changed our constitution to say we accept and respect everybody and we will not discriminate, university professors started interpreting that as, well, what can we do to make our classrooms more inclusive? So they would, when they were instructing teachers about specifically sex ed, they would say, well, it would probably be discriminatory. Thank you very much. It would probably be discriminatory to only talk about heterosexual relationships. That wouldn't be inclusive and welcoming of everyone. So we need to expand on this. So that's my background. And as a result, we started talking to churches. We started talking to parents. They said, what can we do? How can we engage? And even from the very beginning, we didn't take a protest approach. We took more of an approach of educating parents, helping them to understand why the curriculum was there, and then helping them to build relationship. And as a matter of fact, what I'm going to share with you today is, in the 22 years, we built this 5-step process. And what we found is this. Is there any way this front light can be turned down? Or if it can be turned down so that people can see the screen a little better? Maybe a little. Oh, okay. So, this 5-step process. Number 1, parents need to understand the facts. Because what happens is this. When parents go into the school and they're angry, they speak from emotion and they speak inaccurately. And then what happens is the school says, well, we're not teaching that. And it shuts the parents down. Okay, so they need to understand. So we get them to understand the facts. Second, when they learn the facts, they're going to be angry. So we help them to embrace the peaceful process. And it's based on Luke 10. Because people often say, how do we respond? And in Luke 10, when Christ sent out the 72, did he say grab a megaphone and yell at Kathleen when you went outside the legislature? Did he say take a big stick or a protest sign and march outside the schools? No. What did he say? He said, bless even those in opposition. Fellowship. Sit down with them. Eat. Build relationship. Find out what their needs are. And what does it say in verse 9? Heal their sick. Meet their needs. And then once you have established credibility and relationship, then you can share the truth. So that's what we train parents to do. How to engage in the peaceful process. Next step, understand that if you're not teaching this to your children, the school says they have to teach it because parents aren't. So you need to take responsibility for teaching this to your children. And we have resources to help with that. And then you start communicating with the school. All right? Next slide, please. So today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through that 5-step process. Okay? Engage the facts, engage the peaceful process, engage your children, engage the school, and engage others. Once you've done this, share what you've learned. When we talk about engage our children, we have Dana and Jermaine here, and they're going to talk about a very special program for youth that we've started implementing, and it's a wonderful program that actually is used in some schools in the United States, and it empowers children to remain abstinent. As a matter of fact, kids that take this program, 67% of them, okay, the teen sexual activity is actually drops by 67%. Okay? All right, next slide, please. All right, in your package, and I've given you that, and you should have had this package. On the back page, there is, on the very back page, it says, hey, stay informed. And we want to keep you informed. And to encourage you to do that, we have this parent support document. There's a parent support document, which is what I'm going to share today in detail, including all of the parent forms and communication tools, etc. I will, if you hand this in today, that information form, I'll send this to you digitally so that you can print it out and you've got it there to use. All right? Okay, next slide, please. All right, let's engage the facts. And in your package, if you turn the page, you'll come across some of these facts. All right? What are the facts? 40% of high school teens are sexually active. Now, when it comes to grade 9s, the government says, oh, but it's only about 13, 14%. But wait a minute, if it's 14% at grade 9, what do you have to have at grade 12 to get 40%? You actually have to have 65, 70% of teens sexually active. So by the time a teens get through high school, about 70, almost 3/4 of them are sexually active. What are the effects? Teen girls who become pregnant, a negative effect. 67% of them end up in poverty, many for the rest of their lives. In the last 15 years, in Canada, there's been a 282% increase in sexually transmitted infections amongst teens. And teens, get this is critical. Of our entire population, teens represent only 12% of our entire population, but they represent up to 67% of all sexually transmitted infection diagnoses. So don't tell me there isn't much going on in the teen group. There's been a 600% increase in throat cancer because of different ways of expressing ourselves sexually through oral sex and getting STDs in the throat. But we don't tell that to our kids in school. Because if we did, that's considered to be discriminatory because maybe you're giving them information that would cause them to have negative opinions about people for whom that's the preferred method of sexual expression. STIs contribute to, and sometimes we don't really understand this. They contribute to serious life-threatening complications, including cancers, infertility, ectopic pregnancy, spontaneous abortion, stillbirth, low birth weight, neurological damage, and death. And when it comes to the costs, just when it comes to HIV, each diagnosis this year is costing us $1.3 million to treat that person in their lifetime. Huge costs. In church, there's little difference between the sexual activity of Christian kids and non-Christian kids. Next slide, please. So we have to talk to our kids about this. But this is really important. When we talk to the kids, and we ask the kids, what do you need? The kids tell us their sex ed program, 40% of teens say their sex ed program makes them feel pressured to have sex. And these are sexually active teens. 80% of sexually active teens, I'm sorry, am I supposed to be in the camp? Okay. 80% of sexually active teens say they wish they had waited. But when you drill down and you ask the questions, what did you need to be able to wait? Why couldn't you wait? They say, we didn't know how to say no. We didn't know how to identify a dangerous situation. We didn't know how to back out when we got into a dangerous situation. That's not in the sex ed curriculum. It is in ours that we teach our kids. And 94% of those teens that regret being sexually active say, we wish our parents had been more informed so they could talk to us. And get this, church, 70% of all teens, not church teens, all teens, say, we think the church has a bigger role to play and an effective role to play in this, and they're missing the boat. Okay? If you want those studies, I can give you the quotes and you can verify that they're accurate. Next slide, please. Okay. Research shows us this. When it comes to the decisions teens make about sex, sexual activity, and their lifestyle, the 3 most effective agents of influence are, number 1, who? Parents. Number 1. If parents will engage on the subject. Number 2 is? School. No. The church. If the church will engage. Number 3 is the school. I'm going to broaden that to secular society. Okay? Now, what else is involved in secular society besides school? Where else can the kids go to get their answers? Media, friends, internet, porn sites, etc. Now, let me ask you this question. And I don't want you to put your hands up. But if I ask you to put your hands up, how many parents are actively engaged in teaching their kids about sex and healthy relationships and really feel confident and comfortable doing that? I think I might get 1 hand go up. How many churches actually have a program to teach their youth about sex, sexuality, how to back out, how to say no, how to, not just, no, 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 don't do that, but the skills on how to say no. When we ask the church, we ask parents, they say, we don't know where to start, we don't feel equipped. If we don't feel equipped and we're not engaging, who are we defaulting all authority to? And secular society. And when our child has a question, if we're not talking to them about it, are they going to feel comfortable coming to us? No. So where are they going to go? Internet porn sites. So we're defaulting all authority in that direction. So what we said was this. What can we do to help fill this gap? And that's what we've been doing in the last year. Okay? So keep this in mind because this is critical to the answer. Next slide, please. Okay. You have to understand there's 2 kinds of sex ed. Sexual risk reduction and sexual risk avoidance, and it's on your chart there. Okay? Sexual risk avoidance means this. It doesn't just mean abstinence. You know, back in the 60s, when some of us were in school, okay, we would learn, no, you don't do that. Okay? You say that, okay, it was a pretty simple, not a very effective message. Because in the 60s, what happened? Yeah, you know what happened. Okay. All right. Okay.
The flower generation.
Sexual risk avoidance instills a desire in students to determine and protect their personal values and goals by abstaining from sexual activity. Okay? That's sexual risk avoidance. It's a little more than just don't do that, you bad boy. Sexual risk reduction means this. Well, kids are going to be sexually active, so let's kind of help them know about contraceptives and ways in which they may be able to express themselves sexually, but do it in a way that may be less risky. That's sexual risk reduction. That's what our programs are in our schools. Next slide, please. And in your chart, I'm not going to go through this in much detail because we've got a lot to cover, but sexual risk avoidance, it builds understanding the negative effect on teen sexual activity on earning potential. Guess what? This study looked at all of the secular research on family. And it says in here, if you follow the success sequence, and we teach kids the success sequence in our program, if you finish high school, avoid drugs, avoid alcohol, avoid sex, and then you get a certified employable trained area, whether that's a trade, a college level program, or university. And then you work towards getting a full-time job and get married and then have kids, you have less than a 4% chance of ending up in poverty. Less than 4. And then we share with them, now what happens if you make other decisions in high school? If you're a girl and you get pregnant and you have your child, you have a 67% chance of ending up in poverty the rest of your life. If you go the drug route, if you go the alcohol route, if you go, etc., we show them your chances are much higher than 4%. So we teach them the success sequence. And then we ask them, what are your goals and objectives? And Jermaine and Dana are going to tell you about this. They're going to ask them at the beginning, what are your goals and objectives? What do you want to achieve? And then they talk about, how do you protect that? How do you want to make sure that you don't lose those goals? Okay? All right? Not only does it keep you out of poverty, it increases your family relationships. Improve that. Improves your, it reduces your connections to drugs and crime. And you are physically, emotionally, and mentally much healthier if you follow that success sequence. Okay? So that's the sexual risk avoidance. The goal of delayed teen sexual activity, and through abstaining and refusal skills. We have to teach our kids the refusal skills, how to back out. Sexual risk reduction. This is important. It's a rights-based approach. We talk about the child's sexual rights to express themselves. And that equips children with the knowledge, the skills, the attitudes, and values that they need to determine their sexuality. In other words, are you a boy or a girl? And yes, it doesn't depend on your biology. Or are you something in between? Or your orientation, one of the 106 different orientations. Okay? And I'm not saying that, I'm not exaggerating. I'm not exaggerating. Okay? So, to determine their sexuality and to enjoy their sexuality, physically, emotionally, and individually. Okay, now how would you express yourself individually? I think you can figure that out. And in relationships. When we talk about relationships, we're not necessarily talking about heterosexual. And we're not necessarily talking about with one other person, etc. So, this is our sex ed curriculum. Okay? The goal, what we're going to do is try to help them reduce the risk by, well, let's teach them about contraceptives. Let's affirm different ways of expressing yourself sexually so that hopefully they'll choose ways that, well, maybe you can't get pregnant. Orally, anally, etc. And there's the examples. When it comes to even internet sex, I have heard children, youth in high school say, well, my teacher said at least you don't exchange body fluids and you can't get an STI. So it's not that they're saying, don't do that. They're saying, well, if you do, there's some advantages maybe. This is the philosophy our curriculum is based on. Next slide, please. Okay, so we've talked about that already in pretty much in good detail. Where is it coming from? World Health Organization is directing this, along with the International Planned Parenthood Federation, through the United Nations. Next slide. Let's look at what it looks like. We covered that already. Next slide. Okay, so the document that this comes from is World Health Organization document, and here it is. And let's see what their expectations are for children, because the World Health Organization is imposing this on all countries. This is not unusual just for Canada. This is not just Ontario. This is not just Canada. This is all countries. We're dealing right now with 22 countries in French countries in Africa. We're dealing with France, Switzerland, Quebec, Hawaii, Texas. This is an international issue. And it's because it's coming from the World Health Organization. Well, here you go. Let's look at some of the expectations. From birth to 4 years. So before school. Informing children about the enjoyment and pleasure by touching yourself. And we're not talking about touching your toes. Telling your children about the right to explore their gender identity by 4 years of age. You know what? You might think you're a girl. You might think you're a boy. Or you might think you're something in between. From 4 to 6 years, children should consolidate their gender identity. By 6, by age grade 1, we want to have our kids to tell us whether they think they're a boy or a girl. And it's not based on their biology. It's how they feel. And informed about different concepts of a family by grade 1. So different sexual orientation families, etc., etc. From 6 to 9 years. Let's go down here again. The choices about parenthood, pregnancy, infertility, adoption, contraception by grade 2. And enjoyment and pleasure through a game, self-stimulation, and the sexual rights of children. Their sexual rights. As a matter of fact, there have been a number of court cases where pedophiles have gone to court. And the defense is, because what does it mean to sexually abuse? It means to take advantage of a child for your own personal pleasure. That's the new definition. And the perpetrator said, I wasn't taking advantage of the child for my pleasure. I was trying to help the child experience their sexual expression. And there have been many cases where it's come close to ruling in favor of the pedophile. Okay, sexual rights of children. Next slide. From 9 to 12, they need to be informed about age 9. Age 9. We're not talking grade 9. Age 9, grade 4, contraceptives. And what will your first sexual experience be like? I had a grade 6 parent say to me, Phil, can I share with you what my daughter experienced in grade 6? The teacher showed them a lesbian love scene. And I said, well, do you mean like you might see on TV, two girls kissing? And she said, no. Nudity, the whole oral sex, etc. And I said, did you ask the teacher why it was presented? And she said, yes. So the teacher said, because by grade 7, the expectation is the child should be able to communicate to somebody that they may choose, and she said, not that they will choose, but if they choose to express themselves sexually, they have to have some idea of whether they would like it or not. So I showed the video so that they get some exposure, so that they would have some understanding. Whether they could say yes or no, I would like this or not. And it makes educational sense. It does not make public health sense. It does not make moral sense. Okay? Gender orientation, the variability of sexual behavior of young people. So by age 9 to 12, our kids are supposed to know the ways in which they can express themselves sexually. The very different ways. And then we come down here and make decisions to have sex or not. And yes, they can choose not to. But if you keep hearing about it, what's going to happen? We'll find out. Okay, next slide. I just want you to go to the last one. By age 12 to 15, they need to embrace their sexual rights as defined by who? International Planned Parenthood determines the rights of the child when it comes to sex. They are the ones, and they are the ones who wrote this. They are the ones controlling sex ed in schools. Next slide. Okay, that's what it says. That's what it says in the World Health Organization. That's what's being put on pressure on schools. That's why we have the curriculum we have. So here's a summary of some of the concerns. So grade 1, they need to label their genitalia. Well, I don't have a problem with the child knowing the actual accurate names of genitalia if the parent's teaching it. But if it's a class where you have boys and girls, and we have these naked pictures, and we're labeling, and as a matter of fact, in some classrooms, we have these plush toys, penises and vaginas, and things slide in and out of one another to show how it works. It's like stuffed toys. Okay? So what happens? It reduces modesty. And it's leading to increased investigation on the playgrounds by the boys and girls. By grade 3, this is our curriculum, by the way. This isn't World Health Organization. This is our curriculum. Okay? SOGI. We have to teach sexual orientation and gender identity. They must understand it. And let's watch a video, and we'll come back to this again, but let's watch a video about sexual orientation and gender identity. Please, next slide.
A family can be made up in many different ways. It's called SOGI, for Sexual Orientation and Gender Identification, a curriculum that teaches public school students across Canada to celebrate the homosexual lifestyle and that gender is fluid. In other words, your gender is not dependent on what parts you were born with, but rather what you feel like in the moment.
People that are boys, there's people that are girls. There are people whose gender might be a little bit of both, or might even be neither.
Lessons include books about transgender children, such as 10,000 Dresses, and songs like the Rainbow Song.
Gender won't decide the choices we make. Some boys like dressing up, some girls like catching snakes.
The SOGI curriculum started in British Columbia in 2016 and is quickly spreading throughout Canada.
I just thought, who decided that this was okay to teach our children?
Author and inspirational speaker Laura Lynn Tyler Thompson is a leading voice against the SOGI curriculum.
And we are seeing the results of that now, because some kids are reacting very emotionally and saying, you know, and they're in fear. Will I suddenly struggle with feeling like a different gender inside of my body?
But Morgan Auger, a transsexual and supporter, claims it's about acceptance, not indoctrination.
The idea is to teach kids that there are gay kids, and there are trans kids, and there are trans parents and gay parents in our society, and everybody is wanted and desired. After all, that's what our Human Rights Code says, and it's the role of schools to teach the following of our laws.
Another glaring example, drag queen story time. It's happening in Canada and America, where some public schools and libraries invite drag queens, some dressed like porn demons, to read to young children.
And it's a social deconstructionist agenda. They're using children, little 5-year-olds, to accomplish this, and parents are waking up and saying no.
When asked about parents' rights, Auger says,
well, actually, in Canada, parents' rights are limited, and children's rights are put ahead. So the child has the right to be protected from the parents when the parents behave badly.
Canada is known as one of the most gay-friendly countries in the world, with many of their largest cities featuring their own gay villages, like here in Vancouver, which has literally rolled out the Rainbow Road.
Most gays, like village resident Dave Davy DiCarlo, support SOGI and limiting parental rights.
The change that we have to see is sometimes the parents, and the kids are doing actually really okay.
This is very scary stuff.
Longtime Vancouver area pastor Kevin Kavanaugh says this is far more serious than most Canadian Christians realize.
Our problem is not the teachers, the educators, the administrators. This is a battle in the heavenlies.
He says Satan is going after their most vulnerable, the children.
And the little girl came home in tears because the teacher had told her, since she was playing with some toys in the class that were deemed to be masculine in nature, that she was likely a boy in a girl's body.
The battle between an aggressive homosexual agenda and the faith community here in Canada is far from over. But many Christian leaders say it may be the issue that causes a once sleeping church to rise up and be heard. Wendy Griffith, CBN News, Vancouver.
Did you realize that your kids are learning that in school? And this is not a game. I'm not saying it's happening in every classroom, but it is very common. I'm working on a project right now in Durham, and I've got parents coming and sharing what's happening in the classrooms. I've got teachers coming in tears because they're being told what they have to teach. Okay? And why is it happening? When I started teaching it, I started in education in 1978. Every school I was in had a church attached to it, had churches involved, had people from the church volunteering, etc. When I finished education just about 8 years ago, the last 10 years, the church was nowhere to be found. And people of faith were nowhere to be found. Okay? But I've got some good news later on. We can have a huge positive impact. Okay? All right. Next slide, please. If you could switch this over to the other video. So gender identity. I wanted to provide some information for you about that kind of supports your concerns with it. And Michelle Cretella, who is the president of the American Pediatrics Association, has a series of videos on this subject, and I'd like you to watch just this one.
Congratulations, it's a boy. Or congratulations, it's a girl. As a pediatrician for nearly 20 years, that's how many of my patient relationships began. Our bodies declare our sex. Biological sex is not assigned. Sex is determined at conception by our DNA, stamped into every cell of our bodies. Human sexuality is binary. Either you have a normal Y chromosome and develop into a male, or you don't, and you will develop into a female. There are at least 6,500 genetic between men and women. Hormones and surgery cannot and do not change this. And identity is not biological, it is psychological. Identity has to do with thinking and feeling. Thoughts and feelings are not biologically hardwired. Our thinking and feeling may be factually right or factually wrong. For example, if I walk into my doctor's office today and say, "Hi, I'm Margaret Thatcher," my physician will say I am delusional and give me an antipsychotic. However, if instead I walked in and said, "I am a man," he would say, "Congratulations, you're transgender." I would say, "Doctor, I am suicidal. I'm an amputee trapped in a normal body. Please, surgically remove my leg. I'll be diagnosed with body identity integrity disorder." But if I walk up to that same doctor and say, "I'm a man, sign me up for a double mastectomy," my physician will. See, according to most mainstream medical organizations, if you want to cut off a healthy arm or a healthy leg, you're mentally ill. But if you want to cut off healthy breasts or a penis, you're transgender. Let's be clear, no one is born transgender. If gender identity were hardwired in the brain before birth, identical twins would have the same gender identity 100% of the time. They don't. I had one little boy, a patient we'll call Andy. Between the ages of 3 and 5, he increasingly played with girls and stereotypical girl toys and started saying he was a girl. I referred the parents and Andy to a therapist. Sometimes mental illness of a parent or abuse of the child are factors. But more commonly, the child has misperceived family dynamics and internalized a false belief. In the middle of one session, Andy put down the toy truck and held onto the Barbie and said, "Mommy and Daddy, you don't love me when I'm a boy." What the therapist learned is that when Andy was 3, his sister with special needs was born. She required significantly more of his parents' care and attention. Andy misperceived this as, "Mommy and Daddy love girls. If I want them to love me again, I have to be a girl." With family therapy, Andy got better. Today, Andy's parents would be told something quite different. They would hear, "This is who Andy really is. You must change his name, ensure that everyone treats him as a girl, or else he will commit suicide." As Andy would approach puberty, the experts would put him on puberty blockers so that he could continue to impersonate a girl. Experts assure us it doesn't matter that we've never tested puberty blockers in biologically normal children. It doesn't matter that when blockers are used to treat prostate cancer in men and gynecologic problems in women, that they cause problems with memory. We don't need testing. No, we need to arrest his physical development now, or he'll commit suicide. But this is not true. Instead, when supported in their biological sex through natural puberty, the vast majority of gender-confused children get better. Yet, we are chemically castrating gender-confused children with puberty blockers. Then, we permanently sterilize many of them by adding cross-sex hormones. Cross-sex hormones are estrogen and testosterone. Those put young children at risk for heart disease, strokes, diabetes, cancers, and even the very emotional problems that experts claim to Pediatrics recently came out with a report that urges pediatricians to caution teenagers about getting tattoos because tattoos are essentially permanent and can cause scarring. But this same AAP is 110% in support of 16-year-old girls getting a double mastectomy, even without parental consent, so long as the girl insists that she is a man and has been taking testosterone daily for 1 year. Let's be clear, to indoctrinate all children from preschool forward with the lie that they could be trapped in the wrong body disrupts the very foundation of a child's reality testing. If a child can't trust the reality of their physical bodies, who or what can they trust? Transgender ideology in schools is psychological abuse that often leads to chemical castration, sterilization, and surgical mutilation. If that's not child abuse, ladies and gentlemen, what is?
So there's a broad spectrum of opinions on this, and we need to get involved. But how do we go about doing that? Next slide, please, when you can pull that up. Okay? All right, in this package that I gave you is a detailed outline. On the right, in the right column is the expectations in the curriculum. Or sorry, the left column, and in the right column are the explanation of concern. Okay? So I've just given this, I'm not going to cover absolutely everything, okay? But most of it's covered in there. All right? So we covered to grade 3 so far. By the time we get to grade 4, they're talking about affirming relationships at age 4, or grade 4, sorry. Liking someone as more than just a friend. Grade 6, we're going to build sexuality confidence. How are we going to build confidence sexuality? Through personal self-stimulation and affirming that. Because that's how a child can find out what they like and they don't like by experimenting on themselves. And we're going to teach them the skills of consent so that they, hopefully that somebody's not going to be able to take advantage of them. And in grade 6, we're going to teach them how to end a relationship. We don't talk about what are the characteristics of a person that you would want to meet, to live with, and experience life for a long period of time. We don't talk about those positive characteristics. We talk about how to end a relationship. And that's one of the expectations. What's the best we can achieve? Serial monogamy? That's the best that this program really could achieve. And when it comes to stereotyping, in grade 6, we're telling kids you have to stop calling your mom and dad mom and dad. Mom and dad terms don't exist anymore. Him and her, brother, sister, don't exist anymore. Next slide, please. That's in the curriculum document. Grade 7, kids need to know ways to show affection for someone who is more than just a friend. Everything from, and we'll brainstorm in grade 7, everything from holding hands to anal, oral, vaginal, etc. Ways in which you can express your sexuality. When it comes to abstinence, they are taught that abstinence, the change in the definition, the definition has changed. Abstinence means what you prefer not to engage in sexually. So if you prefer one way to express yourself but not another, that's your definition of abstinence. So even now, we're confusing kids even greater. And when we talk abstinence, their understanding of what abstinence means is different than what we're saying. Okay? When it comes, they say, oh, we have to teach the kids about this because they're sexting. Well, guess what? You look at the curriculum doesn't say, don't do this. The curriculum says, if somebody sends you something because they think of you as more than a friend and they send you a sext, be considerate. Don't forward it on. What are we teaching them? We're teaching them the etiquette of sexting. We're not telling them don't sext. Communicating and negotiating consent, that's part of the curriculum. How do you negotiate for sexual activity? And confidence in contraceptives. And in grade 8, we're doing all of the above, except by the end of grade 8, the kids have to develop their sexual health plan. What is it they accept, they don't accept, what do they like, who are they male, are they female, their sexual orientation, etc. by the end of grade 8. Okay, next slide please. All right, they say that they have to teach this because, well, they say it works. They want to reduce teen sexual activity. Well, does it? Their claim, they reduce teen sexual activity, but in New Brunswick implemented this in 2004. Between 2006 and 2010, pregnancies went up 40% amongst the teen population, and STIs went up 38%. Next slide. This report, although it was in the Christian Concern, it wasn't a Christian report. It was in the Cochrane Review Studies, which they looked at 55,000 students in 14 countries in hundreds of sex ed programs. None of them led to reduced STIs. None of them led to reduced pregnancy. As a matter of fact, the Cochrane Review said, in some cases, the opposite was true. Next slide. And yet, our province continues to move on with this. Their claim, they have to provide this information because children need to be able to make decisions. The problem is this: the prefrontal cortex of the child, the part of the brain that deals with rational decision making, isn't fully developed until you are how old? 24. So it's very difficult to give the kids all the information and make rational rational thoughts. More often they make thoughts based on, or they make decisions based on emotion. Because their prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed. Next slide. Their claim, they want to provide students with information, but CSE withholds critical information. Next slide. For example, we don't tell them that if you are in the men who have sex with men population, here is the difference between your risk of becoming HIV compared to heterosexual men who are sexually active with multiple partners. We don't tell them that. Because if we tell them that anal sex is a 7,000 to 20,000% greater risk of becoming HIV positive, that's a statement that could cause somebody to have discriminatory thoughts for someone for whom that's their preferred method of sexual expression. So in school, we're not supposed to teach that to the kids. Next slide. We don't teach the kids the risks of oral sex. As a matter of fact, when it comes to cancer of the throat, the #1 cause for cancer of the throat used to be excessive smoking and drinking. It is now, the #1 cause is oral sex. Next slide. We don't tell the kids that if you have 6 or more oral sex partners in your lifetime, and some kids think of oral sex as like kissing. If you have 6 or more, you have 8.6 times greater chance of getting throat cancer. But we can't tell kids that, because it could cause them to have negative opinions of people for whom that's their preferred method. Next slide. Okay, so we've gone through these stats. Let's just kind of go back and remember them. I'm not going to go over it, just remember. So kids are being impacted. There is increased sexual activity. Next slide. But the kids tell us, this is how sex ed makes us feel. The kids tell us, we really would like to wait, but we don't know how. They tell us, we wish our parents could talk more effectively with us and support us. And the church, gee, would you like to get more involved in this? Next slide. How should we respond? This is how I see many Christians responding. The protests outside the schools, the protests outside Queen's Park, etc. Or we just kind of stick our head in the sand and pretend it's not happening. Okay? Neither way works, and Christ didn't tell us to do either one of those things. Next slide. I talked to you already about what he taught about in Luke 10. So we teach the peaceful process. I'm not going to do that again. Okay? Bless, fellowship, build relationship, meet their needs, and then share God's truth. After you have built credibility. Next slide. Is this building credibility? Protest outside Queen's Park with signs that say math, not masturbation? No. Next slide. All right. In our package, and you have it, when we do this with parents, and we take a little bit more time, there is even ideas on how you can start building a relationship with your child's teacher. You don't have to volunteer in the school for 3 days a week. No. As a matter of fact, 30 years I spent in education. Do you know which parent I remembered? The fondest? Her daughter had to go out for a lot of medical appointments. I put the time in to make sure that the child wasn't behind. So I'd stay after school, I'd stay in recess time, etc., and help her make sure she got caught up. The mother showed up every once in a while with a Tim Hortons double-double. That's the one I remember. Everybody else? No. Does it take much to build a relationship? No. A note that comes to the teacher. Thanks so much. That science experiment where you blew the volcano off, my son loved that. So just little things like that. And when we do this, and we've done this as a 5-week module, when we do this in the 1 week, the parents actually, they have to come up with 3 things they're going to do that week to bless the teacher. Little things like that. It doesn't take a lot. But how do you start to build a relationship, okay? So, that's the second step. Next slide. Once you've done that, what else? Oh, golly, yeah, I forgot about this one. Don't want to forget about this. Another way you can build a relationship with schools, churches. We've got churches that have adopted the school down the street. We got a church in Hawaii that, this is the biggest, this is the most wonderful thing that's happened. They started out saying, the pastor went to the principal and said, can I take you out for lunch? You know what, we care about these kids. You care about your kids. We want you to do well. We want the kids to do well. We love the teachers. Is there anything we can do to help them? Well, to be perfectly honest, you have to pick the principal up off the floor. He said, man, he says, you know what? He says, I've never had anybody come and ask. So they started by getting seniors go in and volunteer reading to the kids in kindergarten class, helping this way and that way, going and doing some gardening, cleanup, that kind of stuff, you know, and then one senior recognized a whole bunch of kids with behavior problems. And then went to the pastor and said, do you think we might be able to do something to help with that? So they identified 40 kids in the school that did not have positive adult input in their lives. They matched them up with 40 seniors. All those seniors do is come in 1 hour a week. They can't meet with the kid after school. 1 hour a week and just ask the question, how are things going? That's all they do. You know what's happened? Academic achievement's gone up, behavior problems gone down. For every one of the 40 kids. Because somebody cares. So there are many ways churches can build relationship, and then when curriculum comes up, principal, and there's concern, pastor calls the principal up and says, hey, can we go out for lunch? And they have a discussion. And that gets modified and changed then. Okay? Next slide, please. Remember what we said? 3 most important agents of influence? Parents. Number 2, church. Number 3, school. We want to empower parents in church, okay? And 94% of kids say, we wish our parents had been more involved. Next slide. So if you're going to teach your kids sex ed, you're going to teach it from a sexual risk avoidance perspective, aren't you? Okay, because I got to tell you, I know parents, and they've told me this. 14-year-old's going out on a date, father reaches, goes out in the garage and says, in that corner, under the brick, that's the box of condoms. You make sure you get one before you go out. I know that happens. But you're going to teach them from this sexual risk avoidance perspective. And most parents say, where do we start? Next slide. We've got resources to help you out. An easy way to get started is to start at the earliest age possible. And we have a picture book called Mommy, Daddy, Tell Me the Story of Me. And it's a story where Mom and Dad read the story, and it's about, you know, how you came to be. And while we're reading the story, the parents talk about the personal experiences. How I felt when you were inside me, and when we went to the hospital. And you know what happens? The kid wants that story read to them many, many times. And what have you done? You've started to build your trust in that child as the authority on this subject. Starting at age 3 to 5. Then the next book we have, Before I Was Born, grade ages 5 to 8. Yes, it does get into genitalia, but it talks about why God created this way. That's what the whole series is about. Then you get into ages 8 to 11. Yeah, it talks about homosexuality, and it says, you know what? People, God has a guideline for us. People can choose differently. We have to accept and respect that, right? But here's God's guideline, and here's the reason why. And you know what? It doesn't just say it's God's guideline. It says, oh, and here's how it lines up with science and medicine. So it's not just because God says so. We give kids the information, the science, and the medicine to justify their decisions so that they can also communicate that in secular settings. Next slide, please. So that's the God's Design for Sex series. All right, and what I'm doing today is a shortened version of the Engage program. We're going through the 5 steps, okay? In the last year, we've come up with 2 new programs. How do we help parents to positively engage with their kids and begin the lifelong discussion about sex and healthy relationships? We went looking, and we found this program called Building Family Connections, produced by the Medical Institute for Sexual Health, with funds from the Center for Disease Control. Why? Because it works. And it's also endorsed by World Vision. And they use it in third world poverty countries because if we can reduce pregnancy rates, we can reduce poverty. Okay? So it's a 10-hour training program for parents. And the second program we have is called Heritage Keepers. And Heritage Keepers has been produced, again, in the United States. It's actually used in some schools. And when they've tested it, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has tested it with control groups. So they'll do Heritage Keepers in one school, and then they'll match the school to another school which is the same socioeconomic background, etc. Go through the testing, do the Heritage Keepers, 12 months later survey the kids. The kids that have taken Heritage Keepers, 67% reduction in teen sexual activity when compared to the control group. Okay? It works. It starts off asking the question, what are your goals and objectives? What do you want to achieve? Then it goes through the sex ed, and then the last module is rehearsing. If you're put in this situation, how would you back out? How to identify dangerous situations? How to practice, and I don't know whether Dana and Jermaine are going to talk about this, but the safe skills. Safe doesn't mean put on a condom. It means state your boundaries. Right? You're going to do that? No? Okay. State your boundaries. Okay? Avoid dangerous situations. So know how to, like drinking, drugs, etc. Avoid dangerous situations. Firmly say no. And why not? And then if they continue to pressure, you exit. Okay? So they teach them that, and they practice it. Okay? In kind of group settings. Anyway, it's great. We've got Dana and Jermaine here, and they're going to share with you Heritage Keepers. It's really good to see the youth here, because youth, you can find out what this is about. All right. And these are our certified instructors.
Good afternoon. The lights are on. Good afternoon, everyone. How you guys doing? Good. All right. The lights are on. I can move around. Awesome. So, so happy to be here. So happy to be here. So thank you so much for having us. My name is Jermaine. This is.
And Dana.
And we'll be sharing the microphone. So, yeah. So we're, as Phil said, that we are the Heritage Keepers certified teachers. So a few of us went down to Austin, Texas last October of 2017 to learn about this really, really awesome curriculum that we're going to share just a little tidbit of what we learned and what we would love to see taught up here in Canada because it's amazing. It's amazing, really good stuff. Can I say something really quick that I know it may look like there's a lot of doom and gloom when it comes to this whole sex ed curriculum and the agendas that are kind of being pushed right now. But I just want to let you know that God's moving. God is definitely in this. There is hope. And I'm not saying that we're the hope of the nations, we're going to change everything, but I believe that God's implementing a strategy, which is partly what Peace and Heritage Keepers and what we're trying to do to bring this curriculum up here and to really inform you guys as to what's happening and how you guys can take part. Because, like Phil mentioned, it's one thing to know what's going on and then get really, really angry about it, but then what we want to do is not just raise our fist, but say, Lord, what can we do to serve our schools? Now we know that we don't wage war against flesh and blood, right? It's against principalities and powers. And I had to walk through a process myself because, you know, when Phil shares, it's like the second time I've heard Phil share this, and I'm just, they're doing it again, you know? And I get, you know, there's just like this righteous anger. But it's not against people, right? It's against the principalities and powers that we want to see changed. Amen? Amen. Okay, cool. So we're going to jump right into it. So basically, this curriculum is it's really interesting. Excuse me. In 2012, it's a certified program, one of 31 evidence-based teen pregnancy prevention programs that we got taught on over a course of, I would say, 3 days. And it's really cool because it focuses not so much on risk reduction, it's risk avoidance. And risk avoidance is really awesome because risk avoidance isn't so much slap you, don't do that, don't have sex. It really speaks on value, purpose, goals, identity, why you're actually here. So we take the children through a process as to, okay, you could go out and have sex, that's something you could do, but take a look at this. If you went out and had sex, these are consequences that you may face. So if you get pregnant, is that something that you want to go home and tell your parents? If you catch an STD or STI, is that something that you actually want to tell your parents? We take them through the process, and not just the negatives, but you have a purpose. You have a purpose, you have a destiny, you have a call in your life. So they start off like, it's so funny because whenever we do these, you know, teens sit back and I'm kind of like, oh, here we go, you can't have sex talk again, you're talking about to have sex. And by the end, it just opens up their mind because like, man, I want to learn more about it. So it's really cool. Yeah, so, you want to jump?
Can I jump?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. The reason I think that there's that shift and there's that engagement and there's that is because we really start off with, okay, what is your values? What's in your heart? What's your dreams? What are your goals? You know, and they think through what is their purpose and what do they want to see? And we take them through like the medical, the scientific, to get from point A to point B. This is the path that you'll follow that'll give you the most likely success. You know, and we talk about, so we start with their values, and there's a lot of games and interaction and role play where they're actually put in situations. And the cool thing is they create a lot of the role play. So when you're creating the role play and you're thinking about yourself in that situation and how do you say no and what is the right way to do that and how do you influence your friends and what is the consequences, we're not telling them you have to do this, you have to do that. It actually becomes their own internal thinking that, hey, this is what needs to be done, and this is how it needs to be done. And then we bring in the medical, and we said how it was proven. This is proven at the Ivy League level several times by universities. This is something that is so well proven that it has replaced sexual risk avoidance curriculums in areas in the States. That's like as if the curriculum we have, you know, as if someone would come and present a better curriculum and they'd say, oh, we want to teach that in all the schools in our area instead. This is what's happening with this HK curriculum in the States because it is a more proven alternative to what's going on.
It's scientifically backed, it's evidence-based.
Yeah. Okay, I'll just go quickly through a few of the other things in the program. So we talk about family formation, we go through birth and videos. I love the section we do sex is like a fire. And in that we talk about the positives and the negatives of fire because fire within boundaries is warm, it's comforting, it's a lot of wonderful things that are true about sex if you do them within the proper boundaries of marriage. But sex outside of those boundaries, like fire outside of those boundaries, can be very deadly. And they go through an exercise that actually puts them in the emotions of that comparison, and then we have the medical knowledge to back it. We talk very clearly about their biology, their body, something that's not taught very properly or clearly in schools. Some parts of that is avoided these days because it contradicts some gender identity stuff. So we go through all that they need to know about themselves and their bodies in a proper way scientifically. STDs, STIs, as Phil had mentioned. We talk about why marriage matters, why monogamous relationships matter, what are the difference and the foundation of our society. Again, biblically, scientifically, properly, right? Lust and infatuation, the difference of those kinds of relationships and interactions, and who you are. Phil mentioned the SAFE plan, so I won't go through that, but we also talk about who you are, because honestly, this comes down to your identity as a person. You know, we're talking about sexual identity. Well, what about your identity and your confidence to be who you are and to stand by what you want in a society that's telling you otherwise?
Who you are in Christ.
And who you are in Christ.
And I'll just tell a really, really quick story just about value. I work at a youth shelter out in Brampton. Brampton's like on the other side of the country, pretty much from here. But you know, getting down here was like, whoa.
Had a long drive.
Yeah, a long drive. It was like Hamilton, yes, praise God. So I work with a very interesting population, age 16 to 24. So it's a youth shelter. So you're seeing people who are drug addicted, neglected, abused, sexually trafficked. This last year, right around the same weekend, around this time, a lady was dropped off, a 16-year-old young girl was dropped off by a CS worker and a police officer, who's a detective. Long short of it all, she's being trafficked. She was out, she left her parents' house for a number of weeks, and there's these back alley websites that you can apparently go on and then book people who are trafficking. And the father didn't know where she was, but she knew that she was being trafficked, so he booked her online and then showed up at the house to try to take her from the person that was trafficking her. So the CSA worker got involved, and the detective came and they got involved, and they pulled her from this motel, dropped her off at the youth shelter, and I'm there with a CSA worker, a detective, and we had a couple of staff who were sitting there, we're talking with her. It was one of the most difficult conversations I had to have, because I was there talking with her and I said, you know, what's going on, are you okay? And she was upset with us, and I was in disbelief. She said, you messed up my $3,000 night. He says, this is a long weekend and you messed up my $3,000 night. And I said, come again? And we started this conversation, and then basically she wasn't trafficking for that long, but she was just kind of boasting about how her person that was trafficking her was buying her Prada bags and this and this and this, and she enjoys this lifestyle. And I said to her, if you don't mind me asking, how much are you charging? Because I was just in awe. And she said $200 an hour. And I said, you know, you're worth so much more than $200 an hour. You are so valuable. You're so much, like, you are so unique. You are so precious. There's only going to be one of you in all of creation. And for an hour and a half, we're just there, just talking with her, and it was just going over her head. She goes, you know what? Just find me a bed. In the morning, I'm gonna call my pimp, and he's gonna pick me up, and he'll never see me again. And I worked the overnight shift, so 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. We found her a bed, and as she said, she left. Never saw her again. Don't know where she is. She's most likely still in traffic. The point why I'm telling this story is, you may not have a daughter or a son or child who is in that lifestyle, but the principle is still the same, which is we have to understand that your value, it's your value. And that's what we tell these kids, like, you are so valuable. So whether it be the extreme of you being trafficked or prostituted, or you just keep meeting this guy or this girl and sleeping and so on, I like him, and so on and so forth, you are so valuable. There's only one of you. You don't want to give yourself just to any Tom, Dick, or Harry. You are precious beyond measure. God created you for a purpose, for a plan, and this is what this curriculum does at the end of the day. We take them through a process of self-discovery, your value. It's not so much, don't do this, don't do that. We never do that. Because you know teens, right? If you tell them not to do something, they're going to go the other way. right? But we say, hey, listen, have you considered this? We share our life experiences. I'm married, I'll be married, not be married, I'm married. 3 years. Oh, I had to think about that one. I'm glad she's not here. 3 years next month. 3 years next month. And if you guys know anything else, I had a real big crush. You guys may not know this artist, but her name is Aaliyah. Back in the day, she had R&B. Yeah, you did. Okay, all right. So when I saw her, I was like, man, I wish I could marry someone like her, because she was just she just seemed like someone who was really, really cool. And I said, man, Lord, if I could marry Aaliyah or someone like her, God, you're good. And the Lord found me.
Better than Aaliyah.
Oh, she is. Okay, so my wife is like so much more amazing than Aaliyah. And I waited for her. I wasn't perfect, but I waited for her. So we share those moments of just like, God has an amazing, not just plan for your life, but He wants to bring you the most amazing person. And my wife is amazing, like she really is, right? So when we talk to them, we say, hey, listen, this is something that you can shoot for. It's not some pie in the sky dream. God has that perfect person for you. And you are so precious, you're so important. If you save yourself, for marriage, like it's the most amazing thing you can possibly do.
So there's two things that I really want to highlight that he touched on. We do talk about our experiences. So I've been married 18 years. I'm kind of the one who's been married donkey years in the group of those teaching the youth. But we go through our experiences, and my experiences include having been healed and delivered of severe sexual abuse as a child. So when me and my husband started dating, kind of an interesting testimony, we weren't saved. So the first 3 months of our dating relationship, we were not Christian. We got saved the same time in different cities, not knowing the other one had gotten saved and accepted Christ at that time. So kind of a cool testimony. But so for those first 3 months, we were physical. Not sexually active all the way, but we were physical. So going from being physically active to now having to switch gears and become completely physically abstinent, which we did for 3 years prior to our marriage. So I can share about that struggle and that reality for those kids who are already active, and how do you now make that shift when there's real physical, biological, and psychological things that happen when you have to make such a shift, right? Another thing that I share about is, okay, so early on in our marriage, now we've been married 18 years, so both me and my husband have been pastors. I was a youth pastor for 8 years, he was the praise and worship pastor, and then we were associate pastors. But the beginning of our marriage for a few years, he had a real struggle with pornography. So battling as a couple and defeating the demon of pornography, coming into the place of a happy marriage. So being able to talk to those who are struggling with pornography, and there is another side of it, you can't get free of it. It's a battle that people feel so hopeless about. Another thing that we end up sharing with, because I was a youth leader for 8 years, I did have a lot of youth come to me with their struggles about sexual identity, and got to walk through them to the ends that they desired to see, and had some great success there. So those are some of the things we share. And education is so crucial and important that they have the facts, because even in what Jermaine was sharing about that girl being trafficked, one thing that we have found is that most girls being trafficked do not know they're being trafficked. They believe their pimp is their boyfriend who's buying them gifts. And there's actually, I don't want to get into the app that's been created, but we've been, anyway, there's something happening, and several girls are being saved from that situation too, which is exciting. But I'm going to have Jermaine now start. We're going to teach you a subsection of what we do with the kids. We couldn't really bring in any of the games or anything with a crowd this large, but we're going to start with a subsection of a subsection just to give you a sample.
Yeah, so again, a big part of what we do is identity, it's purpose. And when people when people start to realize that, hey, I'm actually worth a whole lot, like I actually am pretty awesome, not in a cocky, arrogant way, but you have a purpose, then it shifts the conversation from don't have sex, don't have sex to I don't want to have sex. I'm good, bro. So we go through a list of just what it is to be a man, the characteristics of what it is to be a man, or what are the characteristics of what it is to be a woman. So manhood is measured by who he is, his character, and how he is, his actions. So manhood is not measured by what you have. So having a girlfriend does not make you a man, having a car does not make you a man, having money does not make you a man.
A real woman. And these, when we say man or woman, these actually go for both, right? Not that we think the genders are interchangeable. Let's be clear. A real woman is not measured by how she compares to others, which a lot of times is physical for women, and a lot of times that drives girls to see their value based on their sexuality, because if they can get a guy to look at them, that's what they think their value comes from. So it's an important lesson that a woman is not measured by how she compares to others. Being more fashionable, being the one that attracts attention, being the funniest, smartest, or coolest girl. We're not in competition with each other. You know, as women, we are to be those that uplift each other, and we're not to get our identity from if a man is attracted to us, which is hugely the message they're getting, and hugely why women even compare themselves to each other, if they know it or not, you know? Being the prettiest or the most popular, or having the best figure does not make you a woman, and this is something we really get into that.
Yeah, a real man is strong, not so much strong, but strong. He trains his mind and emotions to obey his will, which is huge because men are known, when we talk about strength, it's usually strong and angry, and that's the only thing that defines yourself as a man. But we teach them that no, it's about submit. You're upset. What real strength is saying, you know what, I could swing at you right now, but I'm going to walk away. That's strength. That is true strength, where your pride may be at risk, but you say, you know what, I'm going to defer and go over here because, again, I have a plan, I have a purpose, I have a goal, I ain't going to mess with you today.
A real woman knows herself. She takes the time to find out who she is. You can only set your boundaries if you know what they are, if you know who you are. Okay, so when we go into the safe lesson, if they don't know who they are and what they are, they don't know what their boundaries are, they won't be able to communicate them. So it's important that a real woman knows who she is. She takes that time to know who she is, what she wants to become. So again, without a vision, the people perish. So we start off this whole program with, what is your vision? What is your dream? What are the path that's going to take you there, right? And what she wants to accomplish. And Phil even talked about the statistics of going a certain route, being sexually active, and how they deteriorate. The 67% more likely to be in poverty with pregnancy. All these things in the context of their own dreams and vision.
Yeah. So a real man is confident. He will not forget himself. He will not forget himself to become the person other people want to be. So peer pressure. I take the youth through an exercise. I tell them to turn to the left. So if you don't mind, just turn to your left and the right. Just say this real quick. You turn the person left and right and say, after high school, I'll never see you again. Did you see that? Now some of that, now with social media, Instagram, Facebook, we're more connected, we know that, but it's interesting because I know when I was in high school, I spent so much time trying to impress people that after I was high school, I never saw them ever again. I think actually 99.9% of the people that I went to high school with, I do not see ever, I don't know where they are. I've been out of high school for about 18 years, but I spent we did 5 years, we did OAC, right? We did OAC years? So I did OAC, so then you try to be cool, and I make fun of people, and the girls, and all this type of stuff. After high school, couldn't tell you where they are. Couldn't tell you where. So we say, make sure you figure out who you are first, and that's the most important thing.
Yeah, you can clap for that. A real woman is respectful. She treats people with respect, because how you treat people is a reflection of how you're treating yourself. So she respects herself first so that she respects others. She treats her authorities with respect for their positions. And the way you treat people says more about you than it does about them. Okay? And it's not a loving thing. We also talk about how it's not a loving thing to give in to someone at your own detriment. Because what ends up happening is you end up injuring the relationship. We go through the cycle of relationship and how that's damaging and how you'll end up acting out towards them. And it's actually a hateful act to give in to someone when you're not comfortable about it.
A real man is courageous. He does what is right even when he's alone. The hardest time to be a real man is when everybody's looking or when nobody is looking. So it's that personal integrity piece. Again, right? It's that personal integrity piece we touch on.
A real woman sends a clear message. Her speech, her dress, and behavior don't give people the wrong impression of who she is.
A real man is... A real man is caring? Yes. He reaches out and helps others. Again, it's almost like society kind of pigeonholes what it is to be a man, and to like step out and say, hey, by the way, are you okay? It's just like, men don't do that. But again, what we try to do is not so much redefine what it is to be a man, but really point to what it really is to be a man. And a real man is caring.
And a real woman protects. One thing that convicted me severely from when we had gotten saved and we had been being physical prior to being saved to now making that adjustment was, if I really love this man in front of me, am I going to lead him down a path of lust that will harm him and his salvation and his growth? Does that behavior actually speak love? So a real woman protects, and a real man also protects. We do not hurt people or allow them to be hurt when it is within their power. And in the aspect of a man protecting, he wouldn't want to pressure someone to do something they're not. Yeah, so that's just a little taste of, that's like a little bit of a lesson.
This is a 450-minute curriculum, so we usually do it's either 10 sessions of 45 minutes or 5 sessions of an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So you got like a little sliver of a taste of what we do. So.
And it's described on this page, okay? So if you want to see the kind of summary, if you want a more detailed summary, I have one out in the foyer. Great, thanks. All right, if we can get back to the PowerPoint. And so those are the programs that we have. And next slide. There are a number of different ways of packaging this up. One of the ways that seems to work really well is when we do a Friday night, Saturday conference, okay? And Friday night and Saturday, we host both the Building Family Connections for parents and the Heritage Keeper for youth. And we've had situations where communities have actually reached out to other churches in the community and have worked together so that, and you know, we bring people in from the community. And if you go to the next slide, we call it Stand Firm, Love True. All right? And that's what this is about. And that's what Jermaine and Dana were talking about. You need to be able to stand firm, all right? Know who you are, you know, with integrity, but still love truly, love well. All right? So that's the conference format. We can also do them separately. Like we just finished a series at a church in Mississauga where for 6 weeks we just did the Building Family Connections program. All right? But the conference works out really well. And this is what I like about it most. Starts off Friday night. Parents and youth together. And we're going to start off with a youth pastor who talks to the kids and says, what are your goals and objectives? What do you want to achieve? And then what are the things that could interfere with that? And he says, and yeah, that's what we're here to take care of this weekend. And then a senior pastor talks to the adults and says, what are our hopes and dreams for our kids? And how should we be helping them? What are the difficulties we have? Yeah, that's what we're here to address this weekend. And then the kids go to the Heritage Keeper program. The parents go through the Building Family Connections program. And then on the Saturday, they come together. And the youth talk to the parents about what they've learned. The parents talk to the youth about what they've learned. And the church apologizes to the parents and youth for not taking responsibility and says, we're committed to incorporating this important aspect of God's design for creation as part of instruction. And then the parents apologize to the kids for not taking responsibility because we didn't know. The kids commit to their parents, and it's interesting, I've had phone calls afterwards from parents that say, you wouldn't believe the discussion on the way home in the car. You know, where one child says, Mom, can I tell you something? I've been, you know, on the internet, and you know, these porn sites pop up, and she says, well, I was curious and tempted, and for the last couple of years, I've been going to porn sites. Can you help me with that? Wow. That parent called thank you, because she felt she had some tools to help. And she felt that the children, through Heritage Keepers, realized that there is a bridge between parents and youth. Next slide, please. The last component we're going to talk about today is communicating with schools. Often parents say to me, can we communicate with schools about our concerns with the curriculum? Absolutely. There was a Ontario Court of Appeal, actually a Supreme Court decision made on this, okay, and it basically ruled in favor that said, you know what? The decision provides a strong reaffirmation that parents, not the state, have the primary authority to make decisions for their children. Okay? And it says that the majority has signaled, the majority of judges signaled to public schools that they must be careful not to undermine a student's beliefs. And that they need to listen to parents when they come in to talk in a reasonable way. This was a great decision. Next slide. So in your program, excuse me, in your package, even today, we have some tools to help parents communicate. And we have a letter that parents fill in. Now we take half an hour to guide parents through the process of how to fill it in, etc. The instructions are in there, okay? But this is a communication tool that parents take in and just says, hey, we're raising our kids from a traditional faith perspective. And if you're going to have planned instruction on, and it's not just sex ed, other things that could be in conflict with our beliefs, okay, and it lists them. It doesn't say, don't do this. It doesn't say, what the heck you perverts teaching my kids. It says, could you inform me so that I can take responsibility? And what we find is this. When 2 or 3 of these letters come into a classroom, the teacher often says, wow, I didn't realize this was an issue. And it affects how they deliver curriculum. Okay? All we have to do is start talking. But let's do it in a reasonable way. Let's do it the way Christ guided us. Build a relationship first, and then share the truth. Next slide. The other thing that we have is, when it comes to sex ed, I showed you the God's Design for Sex Resources, but we've written an alternative, grade 6, 7, and 8, in sexual risk avoidance unit. So parents go in and say, you know, and the letter just says, hey, you know what, sex ed is so important. Could you let us know a few weeks ahead of time so that we can start preparing our kids? And if you share with us exactly what's going to be taught, and there's nothing from which our faith requires us to abstain, then I'll send my child for sex ed. If not, could my child do this independent study alternative program that will start at home, down in the library, and oh, by the way, and it's listed in the back, it even meets government expectations. But it does it in a way that helps to connect the learning to the teachings of the home. We haven't yet had a parent told no when they've gone in that positive way. As a matter of fact, next slide. Here's Greg Hill, and he sent me a letter, and he says, I couldn't believe it. I went in, I called and said, hey, I want to have a discussion about sex ed. I went in for the meeting, and they came out with the curriculum, and it was all flagged, and it looks like they were ready for a battle. And he said, I said to him, I said, I'm not here to fight. I'm here because sex ed's so important. And he said, and everybody just kind of went, oh. And he said, and all I did, and he says this in the email, all I did was follow the peace steps. And just said, sex ed is so important. We're teaching our kids from a sexual risk avoidance perspective. Could you do this? If not, could my child do this independent study alternative? And he says in his letter, the frowns turn to smiles. This is fantastic. Nobody brings in a solution. And that's what we have to do. We have to be bringing into the school what meets our children's learning needs. Okay? Next slide. Next slide. Now, this is Context with Lorna Dewick, and I've got a lady that shares how they've been doing this in Sarnia, but we'll move to this last slide. All right. I don't know what the goal is for this church, your pastor has some ideas. Maybe he'll pull together a small team and they'll discuss it. Maybe even bring in the visiting pastor in and discuss it, possibly with other churches. But we're working now with a number of church communities in Durham, Mississauga, in Woodstock, in Winnipeg, in Honolulu, in Austin, Texas, etc. And basically this is the steps. Number one, okay, develop church unity on the issue. Get some agreement. Do we need to work together on this? And find some churches that want to work together. Number two, host the Peace Engage overview. Presentation like this, that you can invite people to. They can kind of get the background information and say, yeah, this is important, and then they can go out and talk to other people. We then host radio and TV shows that talk about the issue, invite people to them. Often these are Christian shows, Christian radio, okay? WDCX, sometimes that's hard to get here in Hamilton, but there are other radio stations. Number four, we run the Stand Firm, Love True conference that I described to you. Number five, we maintain the momentum by hosting monthly seminars. Because you know what? You don't solve the problem with a conference. You have to continue to maintain. You have to maintain, and you know what? I was I was reminded, Phil, you've been running in Durham. You've been running seminars to help parents maintain momentum, but we haven't been doing anything for youth. Oh man. After the conference. Yeah, you're right. That we're going to have to fix. So we have to continue and run monthly seminars. Train Heritage Keeper and Building Family Connection presenters to support the expansion. Because we've only got 4 trained people. And I got to tell you, with just the calls I've had in the last 2 weeks, okay, we could have 8, 10, 12 conferences this fall. Okay, and we need more people trained. And we have a training coming up in November, the end of November, if you're interested in being trained in Heritage Keepers and how to present the curriculum to kids, or in Building Family Connections. Then we expand to other areas of sexual integrity. You know, we've been talking about families and youth, but the gender identity issue, sexual addictions, pornography. 68% of the people sitting in the pews regularly access pornography. We need to help them. We need help. Health and sex in marriage. What does sex look like in a healthy marriage? I gotta tell you, most people don't have a clue. And because they haven't talked about it. And do you know what the #1 reason for breakups in marriages in the church? It's not money. It's sexless marriages. Because what are the 3 reasons for sex? #1, procreation. #2, when you have intimacy with your partner, it releases hormones that lead to bonding, emotional cementing together and feelings for one another. And #4, yes, pleasure. If we are not involved intimately, we're not bonding. And that's the #1 issue for marriage breakups in the church. Because we've become so busy, or for whatever reasons, we're not building into our relationships and the bonding. Okay? So that's kind of a bit of an outline. Next slide. Okay? We talked about what this is all about. Here are some of the resources that we've developed and we have. Next slide. And if you want to get a hold of us, this is what we're about, equipping parents in the church to empower youth to make healthy, medically accurate, and biblically aligned decisions. Next slide. And if you want to get involved, please fill in that information form, or even if you just want to be kept informed, or if you just want to get that parent support document that I said I would send to you. Fill in that form on the last page, please. And if you could leave it on the table outside, we've got a little book table, then I will connect with you and I'll send you that parent support document. Okay? Thank you so very much. Thank you.
Who wants more? Yeah? All right, come on, let's put our hands together for peace.